My mother's husband kicked me out of my house saying, "Get out, this is our space now, you can afford to rent a room elsewhere," and my mother actually supported him, but the day they left for their honeymoon, I changed the locks, and when they came back, things got interesting. My name is Dan, I am 29 years old, and this is the story of how my own mother chose a parasite over her son, and how I learned that sometimes the family you build is more important than the family you are born into. I bought my house when I was 26. It was not a mansion or anything showy, but it was mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and a small yard in a quiet neighborhood. It cost $185,000, and it took me 5 years of hard work and disciplined saving to gather the $37,000 down payment. I work as an engineer for a well-known company in my city, and I earn a good salary, about $7,800 a month, which is enough to live comfortably and save for the future. I am not rich, but I do not lack anything either. The day I signed the papers for the house, I cried because it was the culmination of years of effort and because I finally had something that was completely mine, something no one could take away from me, or so I thought. It was my sanctuary, my refuge, my greatest achievement, and I shared it with the one person I thought deserved to be there, my mother. My mom, Patty, was 52 years old when things got complicated for her. She had worked for 20 years as an administrator at a manufacturing plant, but the company closed operations and laid her off with a severance of only $8,000. She tried to survive on that money while looking for another job, but at 52 without a college degree, offers were scarce and paid poorly. Her savings evaporated quickly, and she could not pay the rent on her apartment for 3 months in a row. The eviction was brutal, the landlord had no compassion, and her things were literally put out on the street. She called me crying, saying, "Dan, I don't know what to do, I have nowhere to go, your aunt can't take me in because her house is too small, and your grandparents are in a nursing home, I need help." I did not think twice. I told her to come to my house and that she could stay as long as she needed. She asked if I was sure, her voice breaking, saying she didn't want to be a burden, but I assured her she would never be a burden because she is my mother and she always took care of me when I was a kid. So now it was my turn to take care of her. She moved in a week later with 3 suitcases and a box of keepsakes. I gave her the master bedroom, the one with the private bathroom, telling her she would be comfortable there. She protested, saying she couldn't take my room, but I insisted firmly that she needed her privacy and I could use the guest bedroom without any problem. The first few months were good. She cooked, which was something I almost never did, and the house always smelled like home-cooked meals when I got home from work. She cleaned, even though I told her 1,000 times it wasn't necessary, but she said she needed to feel useful. I paid for everything. The mortgage, which was $1,400 a month, the utilities, which were $280, the food, which was $600. Absolutely everything. She didn't contribute financially because she had no income, but her presence made the house feel like a home. I gave her money every week for her personal expenses, $200 a week for whatever she needed, like beauty products, clothes, or going out with friends. She always said I didn't have to do that, but I wanted to because she was my mom. After 6 months, she got a part-time job at a library, earning $1,100 a month, and she tried to contribute to the household expenses, but I refused and told her to save her money and rebuild her savings because the house was covered. We were doing well, we were a good team, she was recovering, and I was happy to have her close. But then she met Rick. Rick appeared 7 months after Mom moved in with me. She met him at an event at the library where she worked because he had gone to a talk on local history. She told me one night at dinner that she met someone with a sparkle in her eyes that I hadn't seen in years. I was surprised but happy and asked her to tell me about him. She said his name is Rick, he is 49, very interesting and cultured, and they talked for hours after the talk and he asked for her number. I told her that was great and that she deserved to be happy, and asked what he did for a living. She said he was between jobs at the moment, and something in her tone gave me pause, but she quickly added that he is very smart and just needs the right opportunity. That was red flag number 1, being between jobs at 49. I asked carefully how long he had been out of work, and she vaguely said a few months, but insisted it didn't matter because a job doesn't define a person, and that he is kind, attentive, and makes her laugh. I decided not to push it because Mom was an adult and could make her own decisions about her love life. I met Rick 2 weeks later when Mom invited him to dinner. He arrived with a bottle of cheap wine and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He shook my hand with a weak grip and said it was a pleasure, and that my mother spoke wonders of me, then made a strange comment for a first meeting, asking if engineering paid well. I answered cautiously that I did okay. Every time he looked at me, there was something in his eyes like contempt or resentment, as if my existence offended him. After he left, I told Mom I didn't like him much, but she begged me to give him a chance, saying he was going through a hard time and that once I knew him better, I would see how wonderful he is. But it didn't get better. Rick started coming over more often, first once a week, then twice, then almost every day, and each time he treated my house like it was a hotel. He left dirty dishes in the living room, used my computer without asking permission, and ate the food I bought without any consideration. I told him once after finding my 6-pack empty, "Rick, that beer was mine," and he just said, "Relax, dude," with disdain. "It's just beer. You can buy more with all that money you make." I spoke to Mom saying he needed to respect my space since this is my house. But she defended him, saying he was just trying to connect with me and to give him time to get used to things. But he wasn't trying to connect. He was marking territory. 4 months after meeting him, Mom came home beaming and told me Rick proposed marriage. My heart sank, but I forced a smile and said, "Wow, that is fast." She said she knew, practically breathless with emotion, but when you know, and she loved him and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. I asked carefully if she was sure about this since she barely knew him and he still didn't have a stable job. She got defensive and said love isn't about money and she thought I would understand. I told her it wasn't about money, it was about making sure she was making the right decision. She firmly said it was the right decision and she would love for me to support her, so I told her if she was happy, I was happy. The wedding was small, at the courthouse, with just a few of Mom's close friends. I was there, smiling in the photos, hugging Mom, and shaking Rick's hand. I welcomed him to the family, though the words tasted bitter to me. He gave a strange smile and said, "Thanks, stepson." And the way he said stepson sounded like an insult. After the ceremony, I expected them to leave and find their own place, since Mom still had some savings and Rick was supposedly about to get a job so they could rent something modest. But instead, Mom told me Rick was going to move in here with us. I asked what. Sure, I had heard wrong. And she said he is her husband now, so obviously they can't live apart, and he is going to live here with her. I tried to stay calm and reminded her this is my house and she can't make decisions like that without consulting me first. She started tearing up and said she thought I would understand since they just got married, asking what kind of son would want them to live apart. There it was. The guilt card. She promised it was temporary, just until they found their own place, maybe a month or two. I didn't want to fight right after her wedding, so I finally agreed but said we needed to establish rules because this is my house and it needs to be respected. She hugged me, thanked me, and said I was the best son in the world. Rick moved in the next day with 3 suitcases, 2 boxes, and an attitude like he owned the place. He immediately started rearranging things, moving my books in the living room to make space for his sports magazines, changing the TV channel without asking, and using my office when I wasn't there. I told him after finding him there for the 3rd time that it was my work office, but he just said he was using the computer because his was packed away and it was easier to use mine, offering no apology. I explained it was my private workspace and I had confidential work information there, and he mocked me, saying, "God, you're so dramatic, I'm not going to steal your precious corporate secrets." I talked to Mom again, saying this wasn't working because Rick didn't respect boundaries, but she told me I was exaggerating and he was just trying to feel comfortable, adding that it was hard for him too to move into another man's house. I emphasized that it was my house, which I generously opened to them, and she said they appreciated it, but her tone suggested my generosity was actually my obligation. 5 days after Rick officially moved in, everything exploded. It was a Saturday morning and I was in the kitchen making coffee when Rick walked in, still in his pajamas, with that arrogant expression I had learned to hate. He sat at the table like he owned the place and said, "Dan, we need to talk." I poured my coffee and asked what about. He crossed his arms and said it was about the living situation, explaining that he and my mother are newlyweds and they need their space and their own home to start their life together. I felt relief and said I understood, asking when they planned to move out. He said they weren't moving out, and my relief turned to confusion. He looked at me and said, "You are going to move out." I froze. Sure, I had heard wrong. He explained it simply as if talking to a child, saying this house is perfect for them, it has everything they need, and my mother is already settled here, so it makes sense for me to leave since I can afford to rent a room somewhere because I earn good money so it won't be a problem for me. The absolute audacity of his words left me speechless for a moment. I said slowly that this is my house, I bought it, I pay the mortgage, I pay everything. He waved his hand dismissively and called those technical details, saying, "Your mother lives here and I am her husband, therefore this is our home now, and frankly, your presence is making things awkward because newlyweds need intimacy." I raised my voice asking if he was serious and if he was really asking me to leave my own house. He stood up and said he wasn't asking. He was telling me to get out because it is their space now and I had 1 week to find another place. My patience finally ran out and I said I wasn't going anywhere, and if anyone leaves it will be them. Rick called out to the hallway for his love to come there. Mom appeared, and by her expression it was clear she had been listening to the whole conversation. Rick told her to tell her son what they decided. Mom looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that broke my heart: resignation, decision, and loyalty, but not toward me. She started with a soft voice saying, "Daniel, Rick is right. We are newlyweds and we need our own space to build our family." I repeated incredulously, "Build your family?" Asking what I was then. She said I was her son and always would be, but I was an adult now with my own job and life and didn't need a mother anymore, whereas Rick and she needed each other. I felt tears of rage and betrayal forming as I told her I took her in when she had nowhere to go, gave her my house, supported her, paid for everything, and now she was kicking me out. She said it wasn't kicking me out, although that is exactly what it was, but rather it was time for everyone to have their own space and that I could find a nice apartment. Maybe something even better than this with my salary. I told her with my voice breaking that it wasn't about the money, it was about her choosing him over me, a man she met recently over her son who had been there her whole life. She said it wasn't a competition. I said bitterly that clearly it was, and clearly he won. Rick smiled a smile of triumph and said I had until next Saturday to get my stuff out. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't make a scene. That same afternoon, I packed some suitcases with clothes and essentials and told them I would stay at a hotel while I looked for an apartment. Mom hugged me with tears in her eyes and said it was for the best and I would see that eventually. I didn't answer, I just left. What they didn't know was that I had all the information I needed because Mom, in her excitement, had told me all about their honeymoon. They were leaving Wednesday morning for 3 days at the beach, which Mom had booked with the money I had given her to save. On Wednesday afternoon, I went to my house, the one they had taken from me, and entered with my keys since they hadn't even changed the locks, something I did immediately. I called a professional locksmith and told him I needed to change every single lock, front doors, back doors, windows, everything. He asked if there was a security issue and I said something like that. It took 3 hours to change everything to high security locks that cost $1,200, which I paid without blinking. Then came the hard part, removing their belongings. I went into the master bedroom they had claimed as theirs. Rick's clothes filled my closet, his cheap shoes were scattered on the floor, and Mom's beauty products filled the bathroom. Methodically, I packed everything into boxes, his clothes, her shoes, toiletries, the furniture Rick had brought, their wedding photos, everything. I hired a small moving company to take it all to a storage unit. By Thursday night, the house was completely clean of any trace of them. I washed all the bedding, cleaned every surface, reorganized my books in the living room, and put my office back exactly how it was. I also installed security cameras, one at the front entrance and one at the back, with a live feed to my phone. On Friday, I moved all my stuff back from the hotel. Slept in my own bed in my own house for the first time in a week, and waited. Their flight arrived Saturday at 5:30 in the afternoon. The security cameras caught their taxi, arriving at 7:15. I watched them get out of the taxi, tanned and smiling, carrying suitcases with cruise tags. Rick had his arm around Mom, who was laughing at something, he said. They looked happy, relaxed, and completely oblivious to what was coming. Rick got to the door first, taking out his keys, and tried to open it. The key didn't go in. He tried another, but no luck. He looked at the keys confused, then at the door. I heard Mom ask through the camera audio what was wrong. Rick said tensely that the keys weren't working, none of them. Mom asked how that was possible and tried hers with the same result. Rick's voice got louder as he said, the bastard must have changed the locks. They started ringing the doorbell once, twice, 10 times, then pounding on the door. Rick yelled, Daniel, open this door right now. Mom yelled, Daniel, please, what is going on? I let them pound for 5 more minutes. Then, calmly, I opened the second-floor window of my office, which looked directly over the front entrance, and looked down at them, asking calmly if I could help them. They both looked up, their faces showing initial shock that quickly turned to rage. Rick roared to open the door immediately because it was their house. I simply said, no, this is my house. I bought it, it is in my name, I pay the mortgage, and you are no longer welcome here. Mom screamed that I couldn't do this, because she lived there and her things were there. I told them their things were in a storage unit on Main Street. Paid for 1 week, and after that, they would have to renew it or get their stuff out. I threw the storage unit key down and it landed in the grass in front of them. Rick yelled, asking if I was crazy, and threatened to call the police. I told him to go ahead, and when they arrive, I will show them the deed to the house in my name, the mortgage receipts, and explain that you ordered me to leave my own home. Asking if he thought that would work out well for him. Rick turned red with fury and threatened to sue me and take everything. I told him to try it, as I had all the legal rights on my side, but to please go ahead and waste his money. Then added, oh wait, you don't have any money, do you? You live off my mother's money. Mom started crying and yelled, Daniel, you can't do this to me. I am your mother. Family helps each other. They don't betray each other. Her words hit me, but I was prepared for them. I repeated the word family with a voice still calm but sharp as steel, asking where that family was when she kicked me out of my own house, and where was that loyalty when she chose this parasite over her son. She defended him, saying he is her husband. I said, and I am your son, the son who took you in when you had nowhere to go, the son who supported you for a full year asking for nothing in return, the son who gave you his own room, gave you money every week, and paid absolutely everything so you could rebuild your life, and you repaid me by kicking me out of my own house. Mom pleaded, saying, please, Daniel, we have nowhere to go. We don't have money for a hotel because we spent it all on the honeymoon. I said without sympathy that sounded like their problem, and maybe they should have thought of that before kicking me out, or maybe Rick should have used that money to look for a job instead of going on an expensive vacation. Mom begged again to just let them in for tonight and they would look for something tomorrow. I wanted to give in, for a moment, seeing my mother crying in my driveway. I wanted to open the door, but then I remembered the look on her face when she told me to leave. I remembered how she chose Rick over me without a second thought. And I remembered years of my sacrifice erased in 5 days by a man who never worked a day since I met him. I firmly said no. You told me to get a room somewhere, so my answer now is the same for you. Get a room somewhere. I added that they could pay for it. Oh, wait. No, they can't. Because Rick doesn't work and Mom just spent her savings on a cruise, so I guess they will have to figure that out. Rick threatened that this wasn't over and I would pay for this. I closed the window and left them there, screaming for 10 more minutes until eventually they had to leave, dragging their suitcases, looking for a place to stay. I didn't feel triumph, but I didn't feel guilt either. I felt peace. The next few days were tense. Rick tried to call me 27 times and Mom 34 times, but I blocked both numbers. I received emails from Mom, long and emotional, alternating between begging and accusations, but I didn't answer any of them. 2 weeks later, I found out what happened to them. Mom had gotten a job as a cashier at a supermarket, working full shifts to support them both. They rented a tiny 1-bedroom apartment in a bad neighborhood, using the little money left from her savings for the deposit. Rick, of course, was still not working and spent his days in the apartment playing video games, while Mom worked 8 hours a day standing at a cash register. I couldn't believe Rick had ruined my mother's life, but the worst part is that I couldn't do anything for her since she had chosen him over me. Today, 6 months later, I live alone in my house, the house I bought with my own effort, the house I almost lost for being too generous. Mom is still working at the supermarket and lives in that same small apartment, but to my surprise, she now lives alone because she realized Rick was just a parasite and kicked him out. Maybe someday we can rebuild something, not the relationship we had because that died the day she kicked me out, but perhaps something new and more honest. For now, I am focused on myself, on my work, my life, and my mental peace. I learned that generosity has limits, that family love doesn't mean accepting abuse, and that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to close the door on those who hurt you, even if they share your blood. My house is mine again, my locks are new, and my life is finally mine to live, and that is the best part of all, living well on my own terms, in my own space, without anyone who can take it from me. Subscribe for more daily stories.